Broken Hill is an isolated mining city in the far west of outback New South Wales, Australia. The BH in the world's largest mining company, BHP Billiton, refers to Broken Hill, and its early operations in the city. Broken Hill is located near the border with South Australia on the crossing of the Barrier Highway and the Silver City Highway, in the Barrier Range. It is 315 m above sea level, with a hot desert climate, an average rainfall of 235 mm. The closest major city is Adelaide, the capital of South Australia, which is more than 500 kilometres to the southwest. Broken Hill has been referred to as the Silver City, the oasis of the West, and the capital of the outback. Although over 1,100 kilometres west of Sydney and surrounded by semi-desert, the town has prominent park and garden displays and offers a number of attractions such as the living desert sculptures. Unlike the rest of New South Wales, Broken Hill observes Australian Central Standard Time, the same time zone used in South Australia and the Northern Territory. This is because at the time the Australian Dominions adopted Standard Time, Broken Hill's only direct rail link was with Adelaide, not Sydney. Town name: Broken Hill is Australia's longest-lived mining city. In 1844, the explorer Charles Sturt saw and named the Barrier Range, and at the time referred to a Broken Hill in his diary. Silver ore was later discovered on this Broken Hill in 1883 by a boundary rider named Charles Rasp. The Broken Hill that gave its name to Broken Hill actually comprised a number of hills that appeared to have a break in them. The Broken Hill no longer exists, having been mined away. The area was originally known as Williama. Prior to Sturt's naming, the surrounding area was referred to by the local Aboriginal population as the Leaping Crest. Geology: Broken Hill's massive ore body, which formed about 1,800 million years ago, has proved to be among the world's largest silver-lead-zinc mineral deposits. The ore body is shaped like a boomerang plunging into the earth at its ends and outcropping in the center. The protruding tip of the ore body stood out as a jagged rocky ridge amongst undulating plain country on either side. This was known as the Broken Hill by early pastoralists. Miners called the ore body the line of lode. A unique mineral recently identified from Broken Hill has been named Nihumite after one of the city's famous sons, Ron Nihum. Lead with the isotope signature of the Broken Hill deposits has been found across the entire continent of Antarctica, in ice cores dating back to the late 19th century. History: The earliest human settlers in the area around Broken Hill are thought to be the Wildrakali Aborigines, although originally thought to be intermittent. Owing to the lack of permanent water sources, it has since been found that the indigenous clans of the area were able to survive on underground water holes and wells that were unknown to the European settlers. Many of these water holes are still kept secret from non-indigenous people. As in much of Australia, a combination of disease and aggression by white settlers drove them from their lands. The first European to visit the area was the then Surveyor General of New South Wales, Major Thomas Mitchell, in 1841. 3 years later, in 1844, the explorer Charles Sturt saw and named the Barrier Range while searching for an inland sea. The range was so named as it was a barrier to his progress north. Burke and Wills passed through the area in their famous 1860 Euro 61 expedition, setting up a base camp at nearby Menindee. Pastoralists first began settling the area in the 1850s, with the main trade route to the area along the Darling River. Broken Hill was founded in 1883 by boundary rider Charles Rasp, who patrolled the Mount Gips fences. In 1883 he discovered what he thought was tin, but the samples proved to be silver and lead. The ore body they came from became the largest and richest of its kind in the world. The Broken Hill Proprietary Company was founded by the Syndicate of Seven to mine the ore body of Broken Hill in 1885. By 1915 BHP realized its ore reserves were limited and began to diversify into steel production, and on February 28, 1939 mining at the BHP mines at Broken Hill had ceased. BHP was not the only miner at Broken Hill, and mining continued at the southern and northern ends of the line of lode. Currently the southern and northern operations are run by Peralaya Limited, who plan to open further mines along the line of lode. The Battle of Broken Hill took place on New Year's Day 1915 when two Afghan men fired upon a trainload of people who were headed to a New Year's Day picnic. Since, at that time, Australia was at war with the Ottoman Empire, those people were first speculated to be Turkish, but later identified as being from British colony of India. They killed 4 and wounded 6, before they were killed by a group of policemen and soldiers. In 1918 the Italian ambassador to Australia, Emilio Eales, with the help of the Australian police and the army organised the rounding up of Italian deserters, working there as miners, to be forcibly sent back to Italy to fight in the war. It is also known for its input into the formation of the labour movement in Australia, and has a rich trade union history. Some of the most bitter industrial disputes have been fought in Broken Hill in 1892, 1909 and 1919. The last of these led to the formation in 1923 of the Barrier Industrial Council, a group of 18 trade unions, which became one of the most influential organisations in the politics of the city. Like many outback towns, Broken Hill was built on precious metals, having once had the world's richest deposits of lead, zinc and silver. Although now depleted somewhat, mining still yields around 2 million tonnes annually. Some mine tours are available. Sheep farming is now one of the principal industries in the area, and there are considerably more sheep than people, almost 2 million merino sheep. On January 10, 2007, the Broken Hill City Council was dismissed by the New South Wales Minister for Local Government following a public inquiry. Transport. The city's isolation was a problem until the Adelaide narrow gauge railway link was finished in 1888. Since the New South Wales government would not allow the South Australian government to build a railway to cross the border, the last 19 miles was built by a private company as the Silverton Tramway. The line was so named because it was originally intended to serve the mining town of Silverton, but by the time the railway reached the town it was already being eclipsed by the newer and bigger mine at Broken Hill. The main purpose of the railway was to transport concentrates and ores from the mines to the smelters and port facilities on the coast at Port Pirie, South Australia. As a backload to Broken Hill it transported supplies, principally coal for boilers at the mines and timber for the timber sets used underground in mining. The Silverton Tramway was owned by Broken Hill mining interests. The main sidings and locomotive servicing facilities were located in Railway Town, a suburb of Broken Hill with sidings running to the south and north to serve the mines. The main passenger station was at Sulphide Street. From the later 1890s, Broken Hill Council campaigned for a tramway to provide public transport around town and to the mines. Eventually the NSW government decided to build a tramway which was opened on March 19, 1902. It was run by steam trams transferred from Sydney by sea and then by rail across South Australia. It was a curious operation which after World War I suffered increasingly bad losses until the New South Wales government closed the system in December 1926. Another curiosity was the Tarawih Tramway, which was a narrow-gauge railway line which ran north from Broken Hill for about 40 miles to an area of limestone deposit which was quarried and transported to Broken Hill for use in the smelters at the mines. The tramway opened in 1891 but closed in 1898 as the smelters moved to Port Pirie. In 1889 the Public Works Committee of the New South Wales Legislative Assembly recommended that the government take over the line, and it subsequently became a narrow-gauge part of the New South Wales Government Railways run under contract by the Silverton Tramway Company. It was an excursion train on the Silverton Tramway that was fired on by two immigrants in 1915. In 1919, a 1,435mm standard gauge rail link from Broken Hill to Menindee was opened as the first stage in a planned direct route to Sydney. The terminus for the train was at Crystal Street Station, some distance from the Silverton Tramway Company's Sulphide Street Station. The railway mainly hauled water from the Darling River. The rolling stock all had to be transported by sea to South Australia, and the railway was supervised by the superintendent of the Broken Hill Tramways. In November 1927 the direct link to Sydney was completed. In September 1937 the NSWGR placed into service the Silver City Comet, an air-conditioned rail car which ran between Broken Hill and Parkes. During World War II, land transportation between South Australia and Eastern Australia became important with the threat posed by submarines and mines to coastal shipping. Extensive transshipment yards were constructed at Broken Hill in 1942 to allow transshipment of munitions. However, the threat was never fully realised. With the purchase of the Sulphide Corporation by the Zinc Corporation in 1948, a modern zinc smelter was constructed at Cockle Creek, south of Newcastle. This started to take lead in zinc concentrates directly from Broken Hill via rail in the 1960s, marking the first major use of the rail link to NSW. This was the well-known W44 concentrate train. In 1970, the 1,067mm gauge railway from Port Pirie to Broken Hill was converted to a 1,435mm gauge, thus completing the standard transcontinental gauge line from Sydney to Perth. Water. Broken Hill has never had a permanent local water supply which meets the town's needs. By 1888, when the town's population had reached 5,000, the state government built a series of small storage tanks. By the 1890s, mining development had increased to the point that there was a severe water shortage and the mines and the people fought for water. Emergency water supplies were shipped by rail from the Darling River. In 1891, the Stevens Creek Reservoir was completed by a private company. The cost of water was high but not excessive, and people were willing to pay because the environment was arid. Another reservoir was built at Umberumbica. However, variable rainfall meant supplemental supplies by rail and rationing was still needed. In 1952, Broken Hill's demands for a permanent water supply were met with the completion of a 61 cm pipeline from Menindee. The pipeline can supply 1.6 megalitres of water per hour. Water storage facilities that are part of the Menindee Lakes scheme on the Darling River have secured water supply to Broken Hill, making it a relative oasis amid the harsh climate of the Australian outback. High evaporation rates have resulted in the policy of using the local storages for supply before using the pipeline. In 2004, due to severe drought across much of the Murray-Darling Basin catchment area, the Darling River ceased to flow and the Menindee Lakes dried out. Broken Hill essentially ran out of water, with a muddy sludge coming out of some taps around Christmas time in 2004. The high salt content of the water led to a lot of damage to evaporative air conditioners and rusted out hot water systems at an alarming rate. In 2014, due to mismanagement of the Menindee Lakes scheme and contributing drought conditions in the upper catchment, the Menindee Lakes are all but dry once again. This time the NSW state government is exploring the establishment of bore water from underground aquifers to be used as a backup emergency supply for the town of Broken Hill. The local people are protesting this proposal, with various public meetings and social media forums being held to protest the plan. Electric power. By the 1920s, most of the 9 mines on the line of load had their own steam-powered electrical generators to power the surface and underground workings. As Broken Hill is in a desert with little water and virtually no fuel, steam generation was an expensive option. In 1927, a plan for a central power generating facility was proposed by F.J. Mars, consulting electrical engineer with the central mine. The proposed powerhouse would provide electricity and compressed air. The mines agreed and formed Western New South Wales Electric Power Proprietary Limited to construct and operate the plant. The Sulzer diesel-powered plant was completed in 1931. This was one of the earliest examples of the use of diesel power generation in Australia. The plant was enlarged in 1950 to cope with increased demand from the North Mine. At the same time, a new power station run by the Southern Power Corporation was erected near the new Broken Hill Consolidated Mine to provide power to the southern end of the line of load. Both stations were connected to a common grid that serviced the mines on the line of load. A HVDC back-to-back station with a maximum transmission rate of 40 megawatts was built at Broken Hill in 1986, to draw from the national grid. It consists of 2 static inverters working with a voltage of 8.33 kV. After this station was operational, the 2 other power stations closed and the equipment was gradually removed from the central power station. The mothballed Southern Power Station, now owned by remnant miner Perelia, still houses 5 9-cylinder, Nordberg marine engines and 2 Myrrlees V16 marine engines. In 2010, the Central Power Station buildings were handed back to Broken Hill City Council for a proposed redevelopment as a film studio, due to the perceived need for a facility in Broken Hill by some local people. The historic machinery was all removed and presumably scrapped, and the giant pits that the motors were housed in were filled with concrete to convert the buildings into a warehouse-type layout. The Broken Hill City Council has received considerable funding and spent a large amount of money and resources on establishing a film studio in the buildings, but as at late 2014 these buildings remain largely empty and unused. Climate: Broken Hill has a hot desert climate under the CAR paragraph PPEN climate classification. Winters in Broken Hill are relatively mild and dry, while summers are highly variable, mostly hot and dry with some variation. The average maximum during the summer months is about 32 degrees Celsius with an average of 25% humidity, although occasional rainfall and cooler weather occur. Broken Hill gets 157.3 clear days annually. Dust storms are a common problem in the desert, but in the late 1930s the people of Broken Hill, led by Mr. Keast of the Zinc Corporation mine, created green reserves to surround the town, thus protecting it from the worst of the storms. Dew points in the summer average between 7.5 and 10 degrees Celsius. Demographics: in 1933 Broken Hill, with a population of 26,925, was the third largest urban incorporated area in New South Wales. Broken Hill's population peaked at around 30,000 in the early 1960s and has shrunk by one-third since the heyday of the 1970s zinc boom, with the decrease attributed to migration from the closure and consolidation of mining operations. The impact on Broken Hill's economy of the shrinking mining industry and the more efficient mining rates resulted in a higher proportion of part-time employment, higher employment participation rate by females, a general reduction in overall household incomes, and an increase in the average age of the populace as the young leave seeking work. Broken Hill has always had a small indigenous community. In recent years the proportion of the population identifying as Aboriginal has increased markedly. From 0.6% in 1971 to 5.1% in 2006, partly owing to the migration of non-Indigenous Australians away from Broken Hill. In the 19th and early 20th century Broken Hill was home to a community of Afghans. Afghans worked as camel drivers in parts of outback Australia, and they made a significant contribution to economic growth when transport options were limited. The camel drivers formed the first sizable Muslim communities in Australia, and in Broken Hill they left their mark in the form of the first mosque in NSW. Economy: Broken Hill has been and still is a town dominated by the mining industry. The mines founded on the Broken Hill ore deposit the world's richest lead-zinc ore body have until recently provided the majority of direct employment and indirect employment in the city. The Broken Hill Proprietary Company became Australia's largest mining company, and later became part of the world's largest mining company, BHP Billiton. Before the 1940s, mining was done by hand tools with high labour usage rates and included horse-drawn carts underground. The advent of diesel-powered mining equipment in the late 1940s and the move toward mechanized underground mining has resulted in less labor used per ton of ore recovered, and the mine workforce has declined. Another factor in the shrinking of the workforce has been the consolidation of mining leases and operators from several dozen to just 2 main operators at present. While the low metal prices of the 1990s led to the failure of miner Pasminco Limited, the recent resurgence in metal prices has returned the sole existing operator, Peralaya Limited, to profitability and prompted Consolidated Broken Hill Limited to advance development of the untouched Western Lodes and Centenary Lodes. This created over 70 jobs during development and will lead to a second, new, milling operation built within the town. Although the mining industry is resurgent, labor usage will remain low. Owing to its exposure to the vagaries of the mining industry, and because of a swiftly shrinking population, similar to other rural centers, and compounded by its isolation, Broken Hill has encouraged its widespread artistic credentials and is promoting itself as a tourism destination in order to become less reliant upon mining as a source of employment. Media: the town is served by the local newspaper, the Barrier Daily Truth. Major metropolitan and national newspapers from Adelaide, Sydney and Melbourne are also available in Broken Hill. Local radio stations that are available in the Broken Hill region include 2 Dry FM, a Euro 107.7 Fathoms, a Euro community radio station, Radio 1656 AM, a Euro independent local radio, ABC Local Radio as 999 ABC Broken Hill, a Euro 999 AM, Triple J, a Euro 102.1 Fathoms, ABC Radio National, a Euro 102.9 Fathoms, ABC Classic FM, a Euro 103.7 Fathoms, ABC News Radio, a Euro 104.5 Fathoms, 2BH. Commercial Radio, a Euro 567 AM, 2HIL Hill FM Commercial Radio, a Euro 96.5 Fathoms, Silver City Federated States of Micronesia 88, a Euro 88 Fathoms, Hype FM, a Euro 87.6 Fathoms. The following television channels are available free to air in the Broken Hill region. ABC, which broadcasts the ABC 1, ABC 2, ABC 3 and ABC News 24 channels. SBS broadcasting the SBS 1 and SBS 2 channels. Southern Cross GTSB-KN, Southern Cross 10. Southern Cross 9. 11. 1, GO. GM, 72, 7 Mate. Although Broken Hill is in New South Wales, the programming schedules for these channels is the same as those of 9, 10 and 7 in Adelaide, with local adverts inserted and some variations for coverage of Australian Football League or National Rugby League matches, local and national news and current affairs programs, some lifestyle and light entertainment shows and infomercials. This is because Broken Hill, unlike the rest of New South Wales, is on Central Time. Southern Cross GTSB-KN broadcasts 7 network programming including AFL telecasts and other sporting and major events. Southern Cross 10 broadcasts Network 10 output and some programming from 1HD. On October 31, 2010, Southern Cross GTSB-KN commenced broadcasting a full-time Channel 9 station available in digital broadcast format only. This service will initially be a relay of TCN Sydney, with local advertising inserted. Analog television transmissions were turned off and discontinued on December 15, 2010 as part of the federal government's National Digital TV Switchover Scheme. The Southern Cross Central Service and Impuja Television are available via satellite and terrestrial transmission in the adjacent areas. Broken Hill was featured during the second leg of The Amazing Race, Unfinished Business. Culture. Broken Hill and the surrounding area has many natural and man-made attractions on offer for the tourist. These include mining operations, a visitors centre and lookout on top of the original line of lode mine, historic buildings, town history walking trails, many resident artists and galleries, the sculpture symposium, Cobb and Company coach and wagon rides, Silverton Camel Farm, Stevens Creek, several quarries, lakes, the Mundi Plains, and terrific sunsets. Broken Hill is a major base for both the Royal Flying Doctor Service of Australia and School of the Air. The Brushmen of the Bush was a group of artists who formed in Broken Hill in 1973. Members included Pro Hart and Jack Absalom. The Pro Hart Gallery and Sculpture Park contains a large collection of Hart's paintings and sculptures, as well as many artworks of others that he collected during his lifetime. The gallery also features the Rolls-Royce Silver Shadow that he painted in his unique style. Surprisingly, for a town with such a small population, Broken Hill has a burgeoning nightlife. Many clubs exist and are open most nights of the week until late. Establishments catering to both locals and tourists include the Musicians Club and the Barrier Social Democratic Club. Broken Hill has many literary connections. Crime writer Arthur Upfield developed a nostalgic association with the city after his first visit in 1910, and published The Bachelors of Broken Hill in 1958. Kenneth Cook's 1961 novel Wake and Fright set in the fictional mining town of Bundanyabara is a thinly disguised portrait of Broken Hill. Cook based the novel on eccentric ochre characters he befriended in Broken Hill, drawing on their penchant for ritualistic drinking, two-up, and aggressive mateship. The novel was adapted into a 1971 film of the same name, shot on location in Broken Hill and starring Broken Hill native Chips Rafferty in his final film role. Wake and Fright is now regarded as a seminal film of the Australian New Wave, attracting many more film productions to Broken Hill and the surrounding region, including Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior, Spirits of the Air, Gremlins of the Clouds and The Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. Mario's Palace, now trading as the Palace Hotel, has the Taco-Rama mural featured in The Adventures of Priscilla. More recently, much of Australian novelist Max Barry's 2013 novel Lexicon was set in Broken Hill. Visitors are often fascinated by the houses with corrugated iron walls. Although corrugated iron was widely used as a roofing material throughout Australia, it was not commonly used for walls of houses. Heritage listing: in 2015, Broken Hill became the first city in Australia to be included on the National Heritage List. Transport: Broken Hill is one of the stops of the Indian Pacific passenger service, operated by the Great Southern Rail, from Sydney into Perth and via Adelaide. The weekly NSW Trainlink Outback Explorer service, which was introduced in 1996, arrives from Sydney on Mondays at 19:10. Departing Broken Hill on Tuesdays at 7:45 for the return to Sydney. NSW Trainlink also operates a daily road coach service, departing the Broken Hill Tourist Information Centre at 3:45, connecting at Dubbo with the Central West XPT to Sydney. The return journey arrives daily at 22:45. Regional Express operates air services from Broken Hill Airport to and from Adelaide, Dubbo, Melbourne via Mildura and Sydney. Silver City Scenic Flights provide local scenic flights over the city, longer air safaris to various destinations in outback Australia and also private air charter services from Broken Hill Airport. Buses R Us operates a minibus service to Adelaide on Mondays, Wednesdays and Saturdays with return journeys on Sunday, Tuesday and Friday. Local public transport is provided by Merton's City Bus, operating 4 city bus routes from Monday to Saturday. The city is also serviced by 2 urban taxi companies. Health effects related to the mining industry were endemic to Broken Hill for many years. In 1892, as many as 1 in 50 miners were affected by lead poisoning. As recently as 1991, over 80% of children under 5 years of age had blood lead levels higher than government guidelines. In the early 1990s, an extensive government-funded lead education program was established and people with children under 5 were able to have free lead testing of their children, homes and gardens to assess lead contamination levels. Any property that had considerably high lead levels in ceiling dust or garden soil was provided with free remediation works to reduce potential exposure to lead dust. Lead contamination continues to be one of the most serious health concerns, particularly in children in Broken Hill. Streets located next to the major mine, including Gaffney, Eyre, and Slag streets, have the unenviable award of being classified as some of the most contaminated residential streets in NSW. Notable residents: Steve Abbott, a Euro comedian, Jack Absalom, a Euro artist, Troy Andrews, a Euro wheelchair basketballer and shooter, June Brunhill, a Euro soprano opera singer, whose adopted surname is a contraction of the name of her hometown, Stuart Bown, a Euro Australian rules footballer, Chad Bujiji, a Euro Association footballer, Trevor Butler, a Euro Big Brother Australia 2004 winner, John Casey, a Euro commentator, Dorothy Carroll, hospital matron, Murray Farquhar, a Euro NSW chief stipendiary magistrate, Stuart Finlay McLennan, a Euro actor, Lord Tim Groves, a Euro heavy metal musician, Florence May Harding, a Euro artist and teacher, Pro Hart, a Euro artist, Ion Idris, a Euro novelist, Ray Desmond Jones, a Euro poet and novelist, Albert Morris, a Euro essayist and naturalist, Morris Allen Edgar Morby, industrialist, Ronald Sidney Nehum, a Euro chemist and teacher, Corey Page, a Euro actor, Chips Rafferty, a Euro actor, Stephen Rowe a Euro singer-songwriter, Robin Salik a Euro commercial photographer, Rishad Thorpesley a Euro general manager, BHP Mine, Dean Solomon a Euro Australian rules footballer, Brent Staker a Euro Australian rules footballer, Thelma Thomas a Euro costume designer, Nikki Visser a Euro model and actor, Taylor Walker a Euro Australian rules footballer, Susan Dorothea White a Euro artist, Edward A. Merton Warren a Euro businessman, Raymond J. Warren author and historian. See also. References. Further reading, Railed Transport in the Broken Hill District. Singleton, C.C. Australian Railway Historical Society Bulletin, April. May. June. July. August 1962, Official Broken Hill Campaign a Euro Discover a Lost World, Sharing the Load, The Broken Hill Migrant Story, Official Broken Hill Homepage, Broken Hill Attractions by Frequent Visitors to Broken Hill, watch historical footage of Broken Hill dating from 1926 a Euro 1994 from the National Film and Sound Archive of Australia's collection. From This Broken Hill, visions.com a Euro Broken Hill.